Hello, I'm David Hunt, CEO and founder of Hyperion Executive Search and your host for the Leaders in Cleantech podcast. A bit of delight this week. I have someone who's not just the founder and not just the VC, but somebody who combines both of those things and much more. As I welcome Joost Kruytzer from Big Circle Ventures. Joost, great to have you with us.
Thank you, David. Great to be with you.
So we're going to talk today about going before A round and before seed stage to the venture building side of things. And there's a lot there to discuss and lots of flavors of venture building. But let's dig in first initially with maybe just a super high level view of what Big Circle is. And obviously subsequently we can dig in a little bit further. But as an introduction, tell us briefly about Big Circle Ventures.
Yes, Big Circle Ventures is, as you say, a venture builder, which means that if I put it really kind of to the simplest level, we create startups. So we do not work with existing startups. And the way we do that is by collaborating with universities and companies who develop new technological inventions in the area of climate and circular economy. And many of those inventions actually are not picked up. They stay on the shelf, and that's not always for the right reason. You can imagine it's because there are scientists behind it that just want to continue with scientific work. So what we do is we find those, then we set up a startup company to commercialize those inventions. And then we further support that startup in its growth.
Okay, and this is an area where you've got a huge amount of experience. I'd like to touch on that because you're long into impact, but relatively new into climate tech as such. So perhaps you can share a little bit of the genesis of Big Circle Ventures and your history in venture building.
Yes, so basically back, if you look at my career, I worked as a management consultant. Most of the time I spent in healthcare. And at some point I noticed that the innovation there wasn't going fast enough, and particularly the adoption of new technology. So I started to look at doing work with startups. And that's when I met the founder of NLC, which is a venture builder in healthtech, which had only just started then. This was back in 2015. With a few people based on the idea I just sketched, that there are many inventions laying around that we should use. So I helped then to raise funding and then joined as the COO and spent then the years after that to figure out basically how that model could work and also to build an organization that could do that. And so that worked out well. We managed to grow that venture builder to a team of over 80 people, now active in the US and in Europe. NLC established over 100 health tech startups up till now. And then at that point, I thought, well, if this works in health tech, then there are some other big problems that the world is facing that needs tech. So that's when I started looking in climate and circularity. And that led to the founding of Big Circle Ventures.
Okay, cool. And we'll touch much more into that. I think that's the key thing is there's the model we can talk about, but the reality is in a relatively short period of time in health tech initially, then since what did you say, 2015, over 100 ventures built from almost, I won't say spare necessarily, but from IP and inventions which were underutilized or not utilized at all.
Yes, indeed, and from the start, and this goes for Big Circles as well, the vision was to do this at scale. So to build many startups, not just random, like you have to do a good selection, really capture the advantages that scale provides. And you can imagine those are in the kind of operational sphere. If you build more startups, every time we learn. It also means we can standardize. So how do you found a startup in a new country? If you do it once, that's a lot of work. If you do it 10 times, then you have an advantage there. And I think a very important advantage there is the network that we build up. Because you need a lot of different parties to come together to create a startup and make it successful. So that's kind of the operational side, if you may, of it. Then from a financial point of view, by having a large number of startups, we can also diversify the risk well. which means we can make this very early stage accessible and investable for parties that otherwise would not dare to invest just in an individual startup.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. I think one of the challenges, Joost, is that there's often a lot of misunderstanding around the terminology, because there are different business models around venture builders, but also they are sometimes confused with accelerators and incubators. So perhaps we can just do a little bit of clarification. And you touched on this point already. So incubators, by definition, there's already some tangibility that you then sort of incubate that talent. I guess it's a little closer to venture building. But accelerators work with existing startups to help them to accelerate, but you're pre all of that in the venture building mode, where you're looking, I should say, for IP or potentially one or two scientists or inventors, and there is no company structure to start with. There's nothing to build until you start that process.
True. I think if you want to put it really kind of black and white, then accelerators and incubators work with existing teams, existing startups, and help them further. And we are basically one step upstream, one step before that, where we say we're actually the ones that create those startups. And where you see the overlap is that we keep on supporting the startups that we found. So in that sense, we're then doing often the same things that accelerators and incubators do as well. But our startup can also be part of those accelerators. There's nothing against that, basically.
Yeah. What I love about the concept is that you already touched on this. You already built a team in the previous venture builder, and a big circle. You're starting to build the team that's of experts in building startups, essentially, but they stay with the core organization and they're utilized on different ventures as you start to build those new entities within the organization. Perhaps you can just talk through very briefly a journey. So you establish from a university or from somebody brings to you a piece of technology that you see some value and some opportunity to make an impact in the climate world. What's the kind of the journey from finding that nugget of IP to creating a company and having that grow?
Yes. So the kind of first steps we do is to really look at the technology itself and the potential it has. So that's something that involves conversations with the inventors and the university and with outside experts in that field. And we look at a number of things there. First of all, we want to see if this is really going to have an impact, particularly if it's also providing an additional advantage over technology that's already there or we expect to be developed in the future. I think what's really important is that this technology can scale faster and help the world get faster to net zero or full circular flows than what would be the case with existing technology or technology that would come into place anyway. So we do that analysis. We see whether we think the technology is viable, whether it will be of a cost level that will help the fast scaling up, and whether it really distinguishes itself. And so it can have an additional impact. That for us is a very important step. That, as I said, that does involve us to speak with experts and parties in that field, because we have people in-house which have expertise, but we always need to make sure we speak to the right people who know exactly about this specific field. So that's one big track. And in essence, that's maybe not that different from what investors do as well, because you look in essence at the same elements, only we have to do it in a much earlier stage, usually with much less information. Now, at the same time, we have conversations with the inventors, with the university or the companies involved, whether this is actually something that they're interested in, how the scientists behind it want to be involved or not. And if all these things turn out to be positive, so we think this has a potential, and if all the parties are happy to go down this route, then we sign an agreement that we're going to set up a startup. And from that point onwards, it means there's going to be a new legal entity, there's going to be a license agreement on that technology, and very important, we then go out to recruit a team specialized for this startup that can lead that startup. So you can think of one person for the business side, one person for the tech side. And that's also something that's quite different from a lot of the venture building that we see, which usually starts with one or two people looking at a problem, and then say, hey, we're going to solve this. And usually then you also get more a software solution, because that can then be built from scratch. Where here we start from an existing patent often, that is then built up further by that team. Now, once we found that team and that team is onboarded and we see that it functions well, then a few things happen. Of course, one thing is that we hand that startup over to that team. They become the directors of the startup. And our role changes to an active shareholder. That's also the point where a fund that we've set up to provide initial funding to these startups puts in the first amount of money. That's 150,000 euros. And that's also when we start to support that team in basically raising more funding, finding the right industry partners, and all the other things that you do as an active shareholder. And that can take then for many years, because we work with deep tech. We pick up technologies very early, proof of concept, technology readiness level 2 to 4 usually. So it can take quite a long time before it's on the market. And so we're also set up to keep on supporting the startups. Eventually, when a startup is successful, then at some point we will be able to make an exit on that, which basically provides us with the money to pay our costs so we can build some more startups.
Circle back. Yeah. It's such a fabulous thing, because I've been working with Cleantech startups now for well over a decade, and that challenge is normally, if you have some traction or if you have some super talented team, that there's a way to get VC money. Of course, it's not easy, and a number of people fail to get even that far. But if you're at the earlier stage, particularly with deep tech, where you are, I should say, you don't yet have traction, you're not even probably at pilot stage yet, or maybe there or thereabouts. But there's so many missing pieces that to get a traditional investment is next to impossible, unless you have some really good luck and maybe some good connections. But that by definition means there are really clever people or very clever solutions that just never see the light of day.
Yes, true. And I think within that group, we have the specific focus on those cases where actually the scientists behind it usually say, well, I just want to stay involved in science. And so that's an additional reason why this tech is not picked up. So for us, it's important that we put a team in place that can raise the financing, but also can continue with the development. The inventors or the scientists do stay involved, but sometimes it's eventually after the knowledge transfer has taken place, maybe only for a few days a week as an advisor there. But yes, I think the whole kind of people aspect of this is how you bring these groups together and how you make sure you have a team that can pull this off. That's a very key element of what we do.
Let's touch on that, really, because that's a really fascinating thought. We all know, or hopefully we all know, but certainly I bang about it enough during the podcast, that culture is critical to the success of any startup. So effectively, there must be a culture that you as Big Circle are creating and have, but that then must extend into each and every one of the ventures that you spin out. Not that they're all the same, of course. There's different technologies and different people, but there must be a core culture that you want to create within Big Circle and within the organizations that you then spin out.
Yes, true. That is, and if I look at that, I think you're absolutely right there. It's not that there is a culture for the venture builder and then there is a culture for the startups. That would not work. The relationship is very intense. In essence, like we as a venture builder are the co-founder together with a team that we recruit. So that's all the same culture there, basically. And if you look at the kind of elements that are important in the culture, which come from the model we use, then of course there's the element of having a focus on positive impact. The fund that we're using is as a DR9 fund, but we actually use the impact policy that goes with that across the whole organization. So we're looking for people in the venture builder and for people in the startups, which are really going for that element, basically. So not people who think like, I can go for a quick buck here, like those things are usually picked up. But we want to see there's a positive impact. And if that scales well, then it will be financially attractive as well. So that's one element. The second element is, of course, the entrepreneurial element. And of course, with the people that we recruit for the startups, that's something that is like inherently part of that. People will not step into something that early stage if they don't have that entrepreneurial spirit. But we do need to select for that as well. We see it as one of our tasks to make not only the early stage investable, but also accessible for talented people which could lead these startups. But these can also be people who make the step from industry to this early stage. And then we also really have to see, like, is that step viable? Does it fit with the personality of that person? Well, the entrepreneurial side is important, but that then back goes also for the venture builder. Now we're still a relatively small team because we've only just started this year. But once you get to a team of 50 people and 80 people, what you really need to avoid is that you get a kind of a corporate organization with a corporate culture that is building startups and supporting people who step in, skin in the game in this startup. That's not going to work. So, for example, this skin in the game element is also part of for everybody working at the venture builder. And so that's the second element we want to give in there. I think the third element is to also be very systematic and disciplined about the way we work, because I can tell lots of stories about all the the advantages of working at scale. But if you're not systematic in actually using those advantages, it's basically still a big group of people, each doing their own things. You don't have those advantages. But that also goes for the people who work in our startups. If they want to make use of the network that we have, of all the exchange that they can have with their colleagues in the other startups that we've built, then that part should also be in the culture and in the personality. If you have people who say, like, I know best how this all works, I don't need anybody else, then you're not going to make best use of it. So that's an important element of the culture as well.
Yeah. It's like, as much as you can, creating some kind of cookie cutter systems and processes based on, expertise and previous experience. That's always flexible. Nothing is inflexible, of course, but it's, I guess that helps with the scale. And that's something I wanted perhaps to move on to. Clearly, we touched on very briefly the previous health tech build that built substantial revenue and number of startups. So what's the ambition for Big Circle over the next few years?
Yeah, so over the coming three and a half years, we want to build 30 startups. And in the meantime, we are developing our organization as well, so that will go to over 20 people. And the money we now raise is basically a first round to do that. So we will raise in total about 25 million over that period of time. On the one hand, to finance the venture builder team that is building all these startups. And on the other hand, to grow the fund we have so it can keep on providing the initial financing to the startups.
Yes, because one of the things there around, obviously, the funding that you get with the LP clearly is invested in your model, and you have that previous experience. But you're really looking at patient capital and patience yourself. Clearly, ambition to move quickly and to build scale. But at the same time, when you are picking things up at a very early TRL, and you are picking up things that are, creating things that don't yet exist in deep tech and in hard tech, that in itself all requires an element of skill, of course, but also patience.
True. And it's one of the first things that I tell to potential investors, but also the people who are interested to work with us or in the startups. This is not like a quick SaaS solution that you build up and you can start using in the market after a few years or even, or if possible, sometimes after a few months. This is a patient game. That's true for the capital. That's true for the people involved in that. But it is essential that we develop this technology and that we don't let good inventions go to waste there. And there are many people who see that. I've seen also a market shift of the past 12 to 18 months in people basically saying like okay, we're not going to SaaS ourselves out of this problem. We need these software solutions, but we also need some of the hardware solutions there, and the combination of those. And we also need solutions that take more time to develop. And this is not just about kind of the pure kind of hardware, the devices. We believe that a lot of the inventions that we need come from new materials, the way we produce them, the way we recycle them. That's going to underpin a lot of the energy and material transition that's needed. And again, to develop them into new applications, new products, it's going to take time. But I see a lot of people who are aware of that now, and I see more and more in the different news channels as well. More VC funds coming up and say we are particularly focused on the kind of non-pure software solutions. Deep tech, that's going to take a while. And yes, so it can take 10 years before it's a success. But that's what it takes.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think you're right. I think we've seen the sort of the turn that people are accepting that absolutely SaaS and digitalization are fundamentally critical to the advances, but they themselves need to work on and with something. There needs to be some hardware, I guess, but not just hardware again, because like you say, it's about innovation in a multitude of ways that. Going back to the risk factor, the risk of finding those things at the early stage to bring through is greater, and therefore you need the scale. But if you do get it right, then clearly stuff like, for example, fusion, things that if you get those really outliers correct, then you make a serious game-changing leap in the battle against climate change, for example. So it's all that kind of intertwined. Is it about risk, about scale, about patience that a venture builder brings that perhaps it's very difficult to do in a more of a traditional VC environment?
Yes, true. Again, because it just takes more people and kind of hours of work that you put in, and this is also one of the reasons why you see that VCs find it often difficult to function in this basically in the earlier stages where there is no team. That's one thing that makes it difficult, but the risk levels and also the small tickets that are put in, that makes it difficult in their model. The VCs work from a management fee, which means they have a certain amount of time available to invest. And often, particularly when the funds get larger, then it becomes attractive to put in larger tickets and look for the larger ticket investments. Well, often in these earlier stages, there are smaller tickets needed, and you need to find all these inventions. The venture builder model works in a different way, basically. The investment that people do in the venture builder is translated in hours of work, is then translated in a number of startups, and that means that it's not just like a large amount of cash that's put in at the start. It's a number of hours and work, and via that method we can set up these startups and can develop them further because we just have more hours available, basically.
Yeah. How about from your perspective? Because I say you've done this for a number of years in a slightly different sector in health tech, still an area where there is impact and where it's essential, but a slightly different area. But what are the things that drive you to firstly created this new entity of Big Circle, but also I guess it's a hugely challenging environment, I'm quite sure. But what are the things that I guess that have been most rewarding for you over the years in this venture building type of environment?
Well, for me personally, actually, one of the reasons to kind of from initially having a science background to move into initially consulting then venture building is that I really like to set up new things with a new group of people. And so in essence, setting up a venture builder as an organization is already that. And then part of the work, of course, is to every day create new startups. It's a small party every time we go to university and we see what tech is around. So that's there as well. There's a bit of a nerdy element there as well, which of course helps. But eventually, for me, when it really starts to live, is when we find the right people to basically become the team of a startup. or when we grow the venture builder, every time we find someone who can join the team. And so despite all the tech, I think the kind of people element of it is something that gives me a lot of energy. Headaches sometimes as well, because we all know that the most important reason why startups fail has to do something with the team or the people around the team.
Yeah.
It's crucial to get that right. But at the same time, for me, there's also one thing I've learned that is maybe one of the most important advantages of a venture building model is that if you see that there's something wrong in the team or something is not working or in the ecosystem around it, we can actually help to change that. And that can be a supporting role. It can also sometimes be a slightly harsher role that we say, hey, this is not working. We have to change the team there. But it does mean that with that, we can get it back on track. And it can also just be, I've seen those more than once, such examples in the past where basically the CEO of a startup just fell ill at a crucial moment. Which usually would mean the end of the startup. Right? That's just before a new funding round, then that would be the end of it. But then we can step in and we can help and make sure that startup finds a new team or get through that period. So I think all those elements for me are really at the core of what makes this work special.
Yeah. I guess there's that yin and yang you've touched on. You're creating sort of your own team, which has its challenges and excitement, but you're working with a core team. Everyone knows that it's a headache actually, to build one startup to then to look at build 30 over a few years. You kind of have all of the headaches multiplied, but on the flip side, you do have that supporting infrastructure for you personally and obviously for the startups themselves.
Yeah, so and I think that's basic for us as a venture builder. What we want to create over the coming 3 years, grow our own organization and have that in place. And it's the advantage, of course, for me that like I've done this before. I can see how it works. Of course, this is a different sector as well. So for me, one of the first things that I set out to do is to find a group of people that come with a background from climate and circular. So I've been really pleased and lucky to find the right people there to start this off with. I think now it's also about kind of growing that team further. We already touched on the culture to basically get that going. Sometimes people ask me, okay, you could also just write down what you've done before as a manual and give it to people, but that's just not the way it works. This is something that needs to be internalized by everybody who starts work in a venture builder, and that's a big chunk of what we're doing at the moment. And as well, climate and circularity is not the same as health tech. At the level that you and I now discussed it, there are the same kind of barriers and problems on the climate side as on the health tech side, but there are also some market differences there. Healthcare is a very established market. When you get an invention in, you kind of know what you're going to sell. You get an invention that is going to produce a new stent for to solve heart problems. And when you build that startup, you kind of know what it's going to sell. Like 99% sure if it's going to sell anything, it's going to be a stent. If you find a new material in the university that can produce a new polymer, a new kind of plastic, and what's the application? Who are you going to sell that to? But that's a much more open question. And the market is just not as established. Those value chains are still developing there as well. So whether now you think, oh, if I develop a new component for a battery, I'm going to sell it to Northvolt. Well, maybe in the future you're going to sell it to a supplier of Northvolt. So that's quite a change. And you see it on the financing side as well. There's lots of talk about first of a kind and financing, and see all the different types of financiers, debt and equity financiers, having a little dance together and figuring out how to collaborate there. And sometimes that's still framed as well. It's because this is about 30, 40, 50 million that has to go in. That's such a large amount. But if you look at biotech, those same amounts go in there. But that's a very established market.
Yeah.
There are benchmarks. People know how it works. There are even exit markets where you can, if you do the first stage after phase 1 trial, there's already an exit market and someone else can take it onwards. There are financing forms. People know what they're working with. In climate, we're still figuring that out. So how we deal with those challenges, and again, how as a venture builder, we can make sure that our startups have a really good chance of succeeding in that dynamic field. That is something which we have to develop new, because we can't just copy that from health tech.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point, actually. A number of our clients have done that kind of, I won't say pivot necessarily, but evolution. And in fact, a Dutch client, Leiden, I'm not sure if you know them, Christian Verloot started studying silicone for photovoltaics, but ended up creating a company that provided silicone for silicone anodes for batteries. But it's this kind of evolution. You have some technology or something revolutionary that then you've got to find the right home or at the right time for that. So it's that comes back to, again, the patience, knowing there's some gem of genius there, but it's not always very apparent. That's direct, I should say, from an established marketplace.
Not true, and it also comes back again to the people side of it. See, on the health tech side, usually recruiting one CEO for the startup who could develop the technology, which is not there about clinical trials, could do that, and also do some preparations for the market phase which comes after that. That would usually be enough. But I do expect that many of the startups that we are going to found will need two people from the start. Because there is the development on the tech side, but there's also the business development side, and looking what's happening in the market, what's the pivot we have to make, what's the application we're actually going for. So I expect to see that back in the teams that we're going to put in the startups as well.
Yeah. I guess one other thing to cover a little bit, because even within circularity and climate tech, that's to some degree a broad umbrella already. Are there any particular areas of science and/or technology or engineering that I know you're very young, but are starting to see a particular interest in, or what are the sort of areas where you think it's likely that some of those 30 companies might come from?
Yeah, so we, as you say, we've started pretty broad, and I do expect that we will develop a bit more focus, which will partly also depend on the next group of senior people that we take on board and what profiles they bring with them. But if I look right now, what are kind of areas of interest? Like one example is that we're looking at are what we can do with industrial organic waste flows. And how do we cycle those? You could think of paper sludge, residue of wastewater, those kind of flows, which are pretty homogeneous in a sense, and where maybe microbial or enzyme solutions can play a role as well. We think one of the reasons why we're interested in that is that if it works, then you have flows at scale that you can actually work with. So that's, for example, one reason, one area. Another area that we're looking at is kind of medium-term energy storage in terms of weeks, because for balancing the grid and being able to deal with renewable energies, there's again broad. There can be quite some different solutions for that, but we do expect that. Particularly more kind of chemical solutions, new materials to be used in batteries to make that possible. That's one of the areas we're looking in as well. And then maybe as a third example, it's kind of a next generation chemical recycling for plastics. And that's at the moment where we're working with a technology which combines mechanical and chemical recycling. The most important thing there is to bring the energy level down, so not at 400 Celsius, but at 40 degrees, so you can run that process much more efficient.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit then about I say you're relatively young, but you've got proven track record, both yourself and I know some of the team also proven track record in climate tech. But who are you looking to reach out to at this stage? If you are at a university or somebody who has some IP, or you're the scientist, what could or should they do? And as you start to build your own ecosystem, what sorts of companies or organizations or people are you looking to connect and engage with?
Yes, it's actually pretty broad call that we can make, because if I just look at the different types of players that we need to bring together to create a successful startup, it starts with people who've made an invention, or maybe who own an invention, like a university or a company we just left on a shelf. But it could also be a scientist that says, "Hey, I've got this. I don't know exactly what to do with this." We sometimes get these calls as well. We discuss, and then we go together with the scientists to the university and say, "Hey, can we make this work?" It could also be small companies. There's actually a lot of innovation, particularly in this field, also happening within the SMEs. And some actually produce quite a lot, but can only take up one or two products themselves. That's one of the things that we're doing at the moment, is speaking to some of those parties if we can be a partner for them. So that's one side of it. The other side are basically people with deep expertise in this field who find it interesting to basically be exposed and to discuss with us these inventions we get in the pipeline. And who sometimes maybe just find it interesting, so they kind of know what's happening. Others might find it interesting to, in that way, maybe pick one or two and stay involved with startups that come out of that. So that's one group that we're definitely going to build up our network, and we're really open to people who find this interesting to reach out to us. Of course, then there is the group of people who say, "Hey, I would be interested to lead a startup. I've done that before, and I'm really looking now for a deep tech solution to take this forward." Or it might be someone who said, "I haven't done it before, but I'm in industry. I have a very relevant background. I know this specific segment of market players. I know enough about the tech in general terms. Can we work together so we can find a tech that fits with that person?" And then it extends to, in general, any kind of player in this field that finds it interesting to collaborate with startups. We really want to help our startups to find the right strategic partners for development. Sometimes corporates will want to even get involved in terms of funding, or they might be interested in taking over the startup, or just say, "Hey, we can work together and go into the market." But those kind of relationships with players in the market is something that is really important for the startups, and we can facilitate that as well. And if I look at ourselves, then like we're growing the team. That goes from very senior and experienced people, which and to junior people just come out of university. And if I look at the profiles now, these are all people which have a technical background, a relevant technical background, advanced materials, chemistry, biochemistry, so they kind of know enough about the tech. But if you're more senior in there, and you've moved on and worked more on the business development or maybe even sales side, so you kind of know the market, you know the players, and then you can combine that to make the right decision about what startup we want to build, but then also to be able to connect that startup and that team to the market.
Yeah. Okay.
So quite a broad call.
Yeah. No, which is great for people to be able to reach, because there are a lot of nerds that listen to the show. There's one that hosts it as well. So that was one of the reasons I reached out. Of course, I know some of the team that are working with you, but it's also so exciting to see, I say, that we don't miss opportunities to make real big impact, because things don't necessarily work in traditional models, which is why I reached out around the venture model. So thanks very much, Joost, for spending some time with us to share the venture and to share the journey and the plan. Of course, on the episode page, we'll share ways that people can reach out to you and the team, and to check out the website, amongst other things. But really excited to see the next few years and the ventures that come through from Big Circle, and obviously supporting from our own point of view, but having the ecosystem support what you're doing. But it's been great to spend a bit of time with you. Lots more we could talk about, but time as ever is against us. But it's great just to see us, to say that there's that opportunity for many types of people to engage and make an impact, whether they are the scientists or whether they are people who just want to take something, not the inventor, but they want to take something and grow it. So it's cool that there's an opportunity for people from all different types of backgrounds, as you've touched on there, that can engage and support and collaborate with you at some point. But thanks very much for sharing the journey so far.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.